So once more time, good afternoon to all. I'm Pritsepko Irina. I'm Chief Executive of ICANN National Program, which brings us all here together. This is a significant program on reform on public investments management, which is supported by the World Bank directly and is implemented jointly with the Ukrainian government. Some admin arrangements that I would like to announce before we proceed to official part of our opening. That's the security. Today, Internet suggests that the day long-lasting raid alerts are possible. We have a shelter available, and if raid alert goes on, we'll see the stated. Maybe that's air defense activated at Russia, and we will stay in work for a while. If it is an imminent threat, then we, together with our technicians, move to the shelter and continue work there. So I'm not keeping you waiting anymore longer. I would like to start, and we will start today with such an official opening. And I would like to give a floor to Natalia Shapoval, the president of Kiev School of Economy Institute. Dear Natalia, please. And the floor is yours. Good morning. Good morning, dear Irina. Good morning, dear all. I will speak Ukrainian. It's a huge pleasure to welcome you all. Kiev School of Economy is very lucky to implement this project. I think in March 2022 we started to count and calculate losses, so we were watching news, seeing what was damaged, and originally there were some 60 billions, then 100 billions, the last estimates of World Bank 200 billions, and the same restoration, this figure was growing from 500 billion, now almost 600 billion. And when you talk to partners who supports Ukraine, it looks like that restoration, that is something that costs 500 billion, but probably even more. But the immediate experience of traveling around Ukraine and now engaging communities demonstrates that restoration takes place daily. I saw that for the first time when I visited Posad Pokrovsky. There was such a program announced by the President, Prime Minister, all seniors, that Posad Pokrovsky is going to be restored fully. So we came to see what is possible to do, what university can do and help. And community there were 30 individuals being occupied, and 2 weeks after the occupation there were 300 individuals returned, and people were restoring places house by house. And I think that was 2023. These were the first restorations, and I'm sure many communities presented here. We saw those, and we also see communities who have their territory still occupied. And this restoration looks quite differently. Sometimes those are very critical projects, sometimes it's more about engineering blueprints, but the work goes daily. And when we saw that with the World Bank team, that restoration has to be prepared, the good projects are required. We had such a World Bank team. Anna Berde came to Kiev School of Economy, and we discussed that what is needed to restore Ukraine. And we realized that we need people, we need the respective skills. That is something that we can help here. And from now on, that was probably end of 2023, early 2024. Since then, the program emerged. And in several few months and years of active engagement, the team visited some 12 regions for 329 communities. More than 1,000 community representatives attended the program. So we think that that is something useful. Irina Pitsenko, Larisa Leshchenko, those who run this program, people come to trainings from different regions, get in touch constantly, so that make us think that we're doing something useful. If you have any feedback, please share it with us. That's nice to know. And we also believe that this process of restoration and the respective policy, the policy of investments, could be far more applicable and specific, could be improved due to the feedback from the people who do that daily. So today we do expect that representatives from the ministries, we should have several deputy ministers who own the policies, the regional director, Bob Som, who funds the significant portion of projects of restoration in Ukraine. So that would be a possibility to share your feedback, to hear their views and their thoughts on how that policy could be developed. I'm going to complete soon. I'm grateful for your participation, for your coming from all over Ukraine. It's a big honor, and I would like to give a floor to Bob Som, Regional Director of the World Bank. Bob, I don't know how much time do you have. He runs enormous programs here in Ukraine, and also he finds time to talk to communities. Bob, welcome.
Good morning. It's really a privilege to be here today. As Natalia mentioned, the World Bank is very privileged, along with some of our donor partners, to not only finance this program, but also to provide some technical assistance to it. And a lot of what we do is we listen to you, we listen to other partners, so that we know as the World Bank how best we can support Ukraine. The World Bank has mobilized over $85 billion since the full-scale invasion. And much of this is designed towards preparing for and getting ready for and starting the recovery and reconstruction. And where is that recovery and reconstruction going to happen? It's going to happen in your locations. It's going to happen in your communities. It's going to happen with your people. It's going to happen with you in the leadership. And that's why it's truly a privilege to speak with you today, because this is where things are going to happen. We can all read articles. We can talk about it. We can do whatever we want to do, but at the end of the day, the people are going to expect results. And those results are going to come from you. And that brings us here today. Some people may think that strategy and planning is boring. They may think that, oh, well, there's just something you talk about, but we got to get things done. Well, the reality is that strategy, it is not just a formality. It is the way to get financing, implementation, and results. You already have heard the numbers. You know the scale of the damage since the full-scale invasion. And this is why planning quality matters. You cannot afford to have fragmented ideas, fragmented plans, where that investments are not ready, they're not strategically aligned. Maybe you have one thing to do, but not another. This is why you need to come together. And this is why this program exists. Ukraine's economy of the future, which is guided towards EU accession, towards jobs, towards private sector-led growth, this program fits exactly into that, because reconstruction and recovery needs to be aligned with the economy of the future. And private sector-led growth is not just a slogan. It's what it's about. What do people want? People want jobs. They want jobs in order to feed their families, to send their children to school, to have health care, to have a better, more prosperous life. And that's where jobs come in, and why it's very important to crowd in the private sector. And the private sector looks at this and says, yes, we are willing to come in, we want to create jobs, but we also need some basics. We need energy, we need transportation, we need reforms, We need transparency. We need no corruption. We need the ability to operate fairly and transparently. All of this is what is critical. Now, on the other hand, within the planning side, we have the public investment management system that the government has put together that brings together all levels of government in the strategic project pipeline and looking at, and then eventually into the DREAM, the digital system. Now, before you say anything, we all know that there are lessons to be learned and improvements to be made in this system as it goes down and into the ramadas. And this is why it's important for you to provide your feedback and to provide your ideas on this. What we also note in this single project pipeline is that not all these projects that come in are ready to go. And this is where you come in, and this is where today comes in. Because it's also important that we focus on the quality of that preparation. Project readiness remains a critical factor today and is a hindrance that is preventing some things from happening now. And when you go towards full-scale recovery and reconstruction, this really is going to be what makes or breaks your ability to reconstruct and support people in the recovery. I think there's 3 immediate actions that I would put forward to you for today and to think about as you move forward. Firstly is that central governments and local governments need to work together to come up with meaningful strategies, strengthening the link between you've got the strategies, the implementation, the medium plan investments, and also the project pipeline, so that all together you're connected on this. Secondly is that you want to improve the quality at entry of the work that you're doing through better feasibility studies, better costing, better risk analysis. And the third immediate action we suggest is that to build the implementation readiness early, because financing will not wait for late preparation. You personally are here today. You will be working with people in your communities and your ramadas to help build their implementation capacity. And this is why it's so critical that we talk about that. And that's exactly what the ICANN program is about. The World Bank is very privileged to be able to work with you and to work with KSC Institute and the other partners here where this program is being delivered. Just as there are important actions, there's also great opportunities. And you know these opportunities better than any of us. Firstly, that reconstruction can modernize infrastructure, not just replace it. This is the talking about building back better, building back more green, building back for the needs of the economy of tomorrow. The second opportunity is that better planning can crowd in domestic and foreign private investment. You want investors to come, you want people, investors and companies to come, show them that you have good planning, show them that you have accountability. And this is the third opportunity. Transparent systems like DREAM can build trust through better information and accountability. When we talk to the private sector, they have 3 issues that they typically raise. Obviously, the continuing war is number 1. The other top 2 issues are the shortage of labor and accountability and transparency. And this is where you can come in. So while Ukraine is moving forward very quickly and has made impressive progress, especially during the wartime, the task is now up to you to progress this over the coming years. These things don't happen overnight. They take a little bit of time. But I think the central message is straightforward. Let us use the strategy not as a simple document to approve, a bureaucratic process, but use it as a system to improve quality, and let us recover financing not only to build back faster, but to rebuild smarter, greener, more transparently, and with more jobs for Ukrainians. With that, I wish you well today, but today is just one point in time in your work and what you're doing with local communities with the ICANN program. So it's a privilege for us to be associated with this, and we are with you and we will remain with you. The World Bank is Ukraine's partner. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bob. Окей. Друзі, ми продовжуємо.
Dear friends, we'll continue, and as Natalia had mentioned, we have representatives from the key ministries who own the public investment management reform. I'm sure you're well aware that the reform comes from the strategy to the immediate money spent and cutting the red stripe. So I would like to give the floor to Deputy Minister for Economy, Agriculture and Environment, Anna Artemenko. The given ministry owns the overall methodological frame of reform of investment management, and Anna is going to stay with us for quite a long time, and Anna is going to present what had changed if you unaware. Well, floor is yours. Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank to ICANN project, World Bank and Kiev School of Economy for that opportunity today and be able to discuss such a critical aspect, strategic planning of public investments. That's extremely timely at one hand. 2 years ago, to a great extent, if an event of that sort would happen, we would have nothing to talk about because strategic planning in the perfect world that was somewhere on paper and was not backed up by any legislation or any framework, and there was no architectural logic for those decisions. What was made this year and why, to an extent, since the reform of public investment initiation, the strategic planning took place in parallel, so everyone could see that public investments initiated according to the reform and based on 5 case model. And the first key reasoning for any public investment, that's the strategic reasoning. And quite often what we have seen that to a great extent, not only at community level, there are no qualitative and comprehensive sectoral development strategies, but also that refers to central levels. I think as of now, we witness some evolutionary stage and the stage of change in the mindset, because many of us in 20-25 years been accommodated and accustomed to see a strategy as sort of a document, 1-2 page, about everything good and positive that we're going to improve, we're going to deepen, we're going to take all necessary actions to resolve the problems of a given sector. But this particular year, government had endorsed the sequence of developing the sectoral strategies with necessary indicators of accomplishment and limits and parameters. And when we saw the first single project portfolio of the state and analyzed what sort of a strategic reasoning been mentioned by the initiators of the projects in a given ministries, we saw that more than 200 projects, only half of those had the respective strategic reasoning, although they referred to some strategies. The other half of projects referred to some cabinet decrees, laws and regulations, or in a given cases we saw references to some regulations of European Union, and that accelerated the process of introducing the necessary institutional framework, because the development strategy of any given sector at the central level, regional level or community level, that is the key foundation and the milestone to ensure further full-scale creation of public investment project. So here it is important for us to see that activity, first of all, for the community efforts and focus, because communities are the implementators of all those projects on reconstructions, on restoration. And there are two critical frames here. The first one, it's not an easy reform. We all understand that. We see the problems of the communities same way as the ministries at the central level. So that frame has to provide possibilities and understanding why at all the given object is needed. So strategic planning had to anticipate that we move not from the specific need. It's not a responsive activity to deal with some situational problem. We know that that was the way developing things for many years. We have to build up a school, and then we have to go to the Ministry of Finance and seek funding for this school. Strategic planning should highlight the necessity and priorities of communities in different given needs and requirements. And the second aspect that comes here, that if there is a potential possibility to request budgetary fundings or subventions, those sectoral strategies has to meet the national strategies requirements. So that's the creation of a comprehensive system that is combined by a single logic and covers all possible levels and layers. It is critical to mention that any reform, I don't like really this word, still is initiated by people and for the sake of people. So the final beneficiary and final end user of reform, that's a given individual, citizen and consumer of services. And we understand the challenges that we face not only as communities. For 2 years ago, when reform been initiated, we had no transition period at all. So immediately that has been introduced at all levels, and we understand that sometimes it's difficult to you when rules being reviewed during the game. And we know and we hear, we have a very strong feedback opportunity on the areas and things to be improved further. And Ministry of Economy, as a coordinator, we are constantly operating parallel tracks. On one hand, providing necessary support on available rules, and on the other hand, improving many other aspects of that reform. And this year, one of the focuses is the development of institutional capacity. So that's the training, and we will announce some coordinating activities related to that, because in fact we see a very strong support from our international partners who in fact introduced the reform and community support. These are the key triggers and supporting elements where we feel the aid and support from international financial organizations, bilateral partners. And one of the focuses today for the ministry is to coordinate, I'd rather call it balancing needs, demand and supply. So we questioned communities, what is needed for training and education, because we understand that with the evolution of the system, the demand is changing. It's not about to listen about reform. It's not about to learn the lessons and how to load the dream system. These are going to be much more profound and comprehensive knowledges, niche knowledges that requires very specific skills. And we also polled our partners, we polled communities, and I think in the nearest time we are going to suggest some sort of coordination cell that would allow communities to receive the access to the training, because in any cases, without professionalization of this area, keeping in mind that public investments cover all areas, all branches, and that reform to me is very similar to a public procurement reform which been initiated 12-15 years ago, and as of now we have a very strong training capacity that allows all the customers to undertake the training. There is a profession identified, has been standardized. So we gradually will move in that direction, and today it's a very critical subject because that is about basics and foundations, and we understand how much effort would be required to you to bring your sectoral strategies in accordance and balance it, and to understand what are the priorities of your communities, what we aspire to achieve, what fundings we are keen to attract, and whether our citizen be happy from given projects implemented. So thank you one more time to Kiev School of Economy for being adjustant and participating in this training and education project. And I wish all of us a very productive discussion. Thank you, Anna.
Well, if you want, you can stay. Now I want to pass the floor to the ministry. Everybody works every day. It's development of communities and territories. And Alexei Rebikin, Deputy Minister, Development of Communities and Territories of Ukraine. Alexei. Hello, everyone. Dear Mr. Som, Madam Anna, Madam Natalia, Yaroslav. I've also seen him somewhere here. So the Ministry of Finance, you know that nothing happens without the Ministry of Finance. So yeah, I want to really thank you and the World Bank and the Kiev School of Economy for once again prioritizing such an important thing as a reform of public investment management, which is a very important cornerstone, no less important than decentralization reform, because decentralization gave the power and resources locally, but public investment management makes the spending aware through strategies, strategic documents that are our waypoints for public investments, including that. I'm not going to talk for long, because there will be a review of portfolio of European Investment Bank. Many of you have projects in recovery programs, so I think you will excuse me. But at the same time, I wanted to say that we are entering the new stage of strategic planning. You know that the public strategy of regional development ends in 27, but from 28 to 34, we need to create a new document, strategic planning, and you also have to create your own document, strategic planning, on local and regional levels. So we're planning to complete the work on draft of this strategy this year, so that you have 1 year to basically use it to work out your own strategies. And you know, we have great numbers. 93% communities have their strategies, and more than 1,000 communities have their midterm plans of public investments. They have their own project portfolios, but we have areas of midterm planning that are called like hospital. You understand what I'm talking about? So I'm not criticizing you. You're doing a great job. I thank you so much, because we have agreed back in last year, if there will be a strategy, there will be the public-private, then there will be money. So the State Fund of Regional Development, and this year we're doing the same. But it's important to, from the quantity to move into quality. We know that Decree 527 is now going to be amended to public investment. So Anna said that there was no transition period, but the state did have a transition period. 2025, the reform of public investments management for the state was more flexible than now for communities and regions. And that's not too fair. So we're learning to use this tool. It's an important tool. So this year, from quantity to quality. Another thing about state regional development, I want to thank the World Bank and you personally, Bob, for getting engaged in the new system of state financial So chapter 22, where we are all participants, it says that the state has to have its own financial tool as a system that provides finances and implementation of public investment projects in the communities and regions, after which the structural funds of EU will compensate the spending if the projects comply with the requirements. State FRR has to become this tool. It's about the wider discussion, but after that, the wide coordination between many different ministries: Ministry of Development of Communities and Territories, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Economy, State Auditor Service, Statistics, National Anti-Corruption Bureau, National, so NACP, Corruption Prevention, because the spending has to be transparent and understandable. That's why ahead of us we have quite an understandable and understandable track of work. We thank you for getting involved in strategic planning and public investment management reform. The one thing that would be great to have if the state had an opportunity to encourage you through resources. Because you can make reforms all you want, but if there's no resource that backs that reform, then it just remains the reform. The head of Policia community, not the head, and it's south of Kiev, and there are huge problems. Demographics, economic activity, it's a deoccupied community that was quite damaged, such as in Savinska and Kharkiv. So it would be great if we, such key ministries, would think how to put our reforms on the resources, and after we approve and clear out the reliable system. So thank you for colleagues to get us together. Have a great success. You're doing a great job, the whole team, and you, Arena. Thank you so much. You have a great discussion. The head of department of regional policy is going to be with you, and they will represent the ministry. So have a great success. Thank you so much. So we are now transitioning to an introductory part of what the discussion is about. Most of you who are present here doesn't have the strategy at the moment. Some of you do not have it because it's expired, but some of you don't have it because you never had it in the first place. So deputy ministers talk about public investments reform. When we registered, we had high quality strategy. So we're going to be talking about legislative framework. Then will be applicable steps, what you have to do tomorrow when you will return to your community, so that this whole period, I hope you know, that up to July 15, you have to midterm plan for priority public investments. So what do you do step by step? In the evening, you will have to get this plan so that your subsequent cycle and budget and strategy and investments would be great. You would have additional resources, and you would move every month better and better. So we're going to start this introductory session with the legislation. The key three ministries that are engaged in this reform. We have representatives from three ministries and the moderator, Natalia Shapoval. Natalia Shapoval will be moderating this, and I want to invite for presentation Anna Artemenko, whom you've already seen, Vitaly Protsenko, Director of Department of the Ministry, Development Communities and Territories, and In a couple of minutes, we will also be joined by Dmytro Samoylenko, who is the Deputy Minister of Finance of Ukraine, who will be talking about money with you. So, Dmytro, hello. I would want to invite you right now on the stage. And I will pass the floor to Natalia. You will have the microphones. And my colleagues will help you with the presentation. So have a great productive discussion. You're all encouraged to ask questions because that's why we're here, to ask questions face to face. Thanks, and we will be, after these introductory remarks, we'll proceed to presentations. And we'll have answers to those questions that the previous panel pointed out. So the first presentation will be from Anar Chamenko about the methodology and rules of managing public investments. So we're going to start by describing how it all works, and then how it all is financed and implemented. And then we'll have some more time for everybody to ask questions. So, right, thanks. You know, it's very important that we're talking not only about building a new methodology, a new legislation. It's basically about changing worldview in project cycle, in doing public investments. So first of all, what these key elements are made up from, they are all interconnected with the same logic on all three levels. And they use the same logic as the ministry on the regional level and communities. So first, strategic foundation, where any public investment or public investment projects and potential investments, they will have to be based on quality strategy of community development. So to implement the project using state budget, it's also important to have this interconnection between strategy of community development and the general sector development strategy. The next thing is important is our targets and indicators, because each decision basically has to have a clear goal, objective, indicators, and logic of its implementation, and the deadlines and indicators. So we have implemented measurable indicators to achieve which that's what we need the draft decisions for. The third principle is extremely important, is that we always have some limitations in the budgets, local, state level, and in this case, the prioritization will largely determine where these limited resources will be aimed at. So we are not talking about private investments, and we're not talking about private investments today. It's about state public resources. So each project has to be connected with priorities of community development and basically answers certain foundational questions. Why this project is important? Why it's important to implement it now within the 3-year budgetary cycle? And the fourth principle is Prozoro, transparency and accountability. Because we're built the unified rules for everyone, we have the system called DREAM that facilitates the full digitalization of this process and basically provides traceability of all the stages, starting from very beginning, creation of the project and monitoring and implementation of the project. So, and of course, what I said, we are people-oriented, because in our case, in the center of the system is not just using funds to implement a project, but actually achieving perceivable changes for citizens in the community and service users. So we see certain logic, interconnectedness of these elements, and basically it's some sequence of work that you can see on the slide. We start by saying that each community has to define their own strategy, where they will have to display the vision and priorities of each region. So more or less the problems are similar among the regions, but in any case there are some differences. Like, is this community close to front line, or is it in the western region? So it's important to also have long-term vision and answer the key question: where will the community want to move? We all understand that it's all the time the budgetary constraints. Next is a practical element, which is called midterm planning of public investments. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about it, because you're all connected to shaping the midterm plans in both communities and ministries. Just today we'll have the finalized service provision midterm plan, which will move the strategy in a practical side, because it determines the investments direction and at least roughly describe the resources that are needed. The third element is a key important element, is the unified project portfolio. This is where we, in the project decisions, these are the steps related to turning the priorities into strategy, to agree with the budgetary funding, and to outline the project portfolio. And the next stage, which is very complicated, usually it's funding and implementation of the projects. So in this case, all the opportunities, all the possibilities that are there, and we need to properly manage the public investment programs. So next year we hope to have all the norms and regulations in place, so that the communities also would have a right and possibility to have access to state budget funds. So the last stage is performance assessment. So this is where, thanks to that assessment, you have the opportunity to introduce and define for yourself, does this project practically actually achieves the key results, key deliverables? And that's why that's one of the innovations launched this year, is monitoring of how the project is implemented. So it's a flexible tool to track the process of project implementation on the one hand, and on the other hand it allows to introduce changes. And the system DREAM that you all know, it's the foundation of our transparency and accountability. So I will not dwell too much on that. So what is the midterm public investment plan? Why is it important, and why in this case you are not alone? And we all understand that the need in public investment is hundreds or dozens, hundreds times higher than the available limited resource. And in this case, this is where we need to see the matching, that the investments are matching the targets and objectives, and that the key indicators are also aligned. So this cycle will begin soon in communities. We have introduced some changes in the midterm public investment plans. We updated the list of actions. We designed certain categories, and key indicators, give are clarified now, and how the plan is prepared. It's important to say from each congress of local councils that are happening often, we can hear the same questions on SV formation and flexibility. And together with the Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Development, right on the final stage, we've already designed an important set. On 527, it opens possibilities to implement public-private partnership. So that's an inbuilt PPP within the PIN system. And the second part that is very important for communities, it is about certain flexibility that you will have for transition periods. So that means after these changes, on community level, there will be unified project portfolio from main or not main directions. So the logic we hear in the question allow us to introduce changes into midterm plan of priority investments for 3 years. And in this case, it's a question from everyone, not only communities and ministries, but the logic is basically, and we agree with what the Ministry of Finance believes, that SPE is a plan, it's a forecast, and it's a vision. It's a midterm planning vision of investments. So that means SPE together with budget declaration, and it basically reflects certain expectations and calculations that were valid at the time of its formation, and they are an important part of budgetary process. But this flexibility in the subsequent work to update your project portfolios from flagship or non-flagship areas, that will be your answer. It's not the changes of SPE, but having this flexibility, you will need to introduce such changes properly. So my last slide is what the community has to check right now already, because the issues of strategic planning always was in a certain theoretical part, and the quality of preparation of all the strategies always it never gave too many answers to the question where we're moving. And only after the midterm planning, strategic planning, was built in public investments, it then received a legislative description and definition and the logic, which is foundational for subsequent project decisions. So what we see on the central level, and by the way, not only the Chromadas and communities have problems with strategic planning, the ministries as well. We have indicators on IMF programs. So by the end of the year, all the sectoral strategies on the central level that have to spend budgetary resources that are tied to public investments, they have to be updated. So like we have 17 priority sectors. In each sector there are sub-sectors, there are sub-directions, and so each ministry has like 6 months to identify all their strategic areas and to inspect and to check whether the strategy at all realistic. It has real indicators, how it tied to budgetary cycle, and how does it match the priorities of the industry. So in this case, how the strategies are designed, it can be quite complex, but it just shows you in a structured and clear way what your path should be from start to finish, what you have to account for. So to check whether the strategy is at all present, that's number one. If it's there, then to see the sectors that are a priority for a community, and if the strategy is no longer matching the challenges of martial law, it also will need to be harmonized. So in this document, we have to have strategic operational goals and also the indicators and the how we measure the results and achievement of our goals. So priorities, it's probably one of the most important aspects because strategic planning provides you this set of priorities. You have to be able to answer the question, why do you need to build a school at this point? But the hospital will only be built in 5 years' time. Next stage is to see your project ideas, look at the sectoral portfolios and the potential that you have, so that you can put it into your own logic and to put it in the strategy and priority for specific actions for specific community. And of course, being ready to work with the system DREAM to build high quality project portfolios. And of course, what I stressed in the beginning, in the nearest future, we will be ready to do the coordinational framework for training. We're also designing a huge project that will be called Creating a Concept of Expertise. And basically, these expertise centers have to be present in each region. And people will have to have support 24/7 for not to call Kiev or spend a lot of time on searching. So that's about capacity building. And in any case, we see that the end result of this reform is a well-prepared project. And secondly, it's an indicator of measurability and to what extent you satisfy the interest of the citizens living in the community. So that's a difficult path, but together with 3 ministries and all of our partners, will be able to do that, supported by them, and will provide the necessary framework, methodology, advisory, and explanation. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Anna. Dmitro, you will have the floor, and that would be also a bit of introduction, and perhaps some of your storytelling, what you are on top of, and some specific advices how to attract money for the projects. Yes, good morning. The only thing I can't barely see, because there's front lights, just a reminder, we agreed with the hosts, not meaning myself, but having someone from the Ministry of Finance, I agreed, and the condition was that it is to talk. I checked the presentation, the brief that Minister of Finance prepared. It's boring. I'm not going to even put that on a screen, because talking to people who are key in that process and tell them some blocks, what to do, how to start in terms of funding, I would rather omit that. The only thing is, can we try and see a different brief? And I would save some time for Q&A, because I do have some of my personal views and ideas. Maybe just a few more sentences. You may dislike those. Look, I could present that in such a way that you would stop inviting me further on. Because we said today the parameter, the indicator is a suffer. So if you part of a reform, you suffer, and the more you suffer, the better reformer you are. Well, that's our motto and our slogan. So if you have a brief, I may agree. But if I may, I just remind why I agreed to participate Q&A views. I'm going to speak on behalf of the Minister of Finance, so I would proceed further. As you say later on, then, Vitaly, you have slides, the Director of Regional Policy Department, and then we will speak about implementation, what the Ministry is working on, and we will have more time left for Q&A. Thank you, dear colleagues, dear community representatives and leads. It's a pleasure to be here with the Minister of Economy, Minister of Finance, colleagues from the World Bank. My special thanks goes to you, and I remember our first meetings when we reviewed the program and we provided some proposals. Now we have some tangible outcomes, 12 regions, more than 300 communities covered. I have a small brief and I would like to put that to your attention. Some ministry achievements on the regional policy and planning, and as Bob mentioned, Euro integration, Chapter 22, preparing Ukraine to use EU investing tools and instruments. So we're speaking about community strategies. We should not forget that today legislation has a number of different documents and programs and projects and concepts, and it's a governmental homework to simplify some processes and procedures, and respective legislative initiatives are there, and we would like to draw your attention, as we said in 2025, and continue saying community is the foundation of public investment at the regional level and the national level. Today we spoke about attractiveness of regional and community planning, but also we have to remember the space planning, because regional oblast planning goes separately. Today we speak about the integration as part of PIM reform, but since 2026 and 7 we're going to speak about a single scheme, which we will demonstrate lately, so all the projects would fit to the grounds, to the places where those could be implemented. The next is a qualitative monitoring and evaluation. Unfortunately today, analysis and monitoring of any strategy implementation or trace the criticality of the project implementation, that's the challenge. And today we have to speak about the review of the community and regional monitoring. That's one of the key areas, the territorial oriented parameter. Today we work on the functional parameters of the territories and definitions. What is the front line, adjusted territories, occupied territories? What are the priorities to be? Because every sectoral policy comprises regional and sectoral elements, and key job for us, all the sectoral policies would consider that element. And finally, Chapter 22, coordination of tools and regional policies. It's critical to integrate qualitatively those approaches available at public procurement domain. That's the preparation of Ukraine to use quite a significant financial tools. By initial estimates, if Ukraine is going to be a member candidate in 2028, we will have some 100 billion euros available macro financial support. And if we join EU in the new financial year, that amount can make from 130 to 170 billion euros, and the majority of funding would be directed at investments implementation. Our Polish colleagues annually announce tens of thousands of competitive requests, and regions and communities receive those financial resources and use that. Just the Transcarpathian Voivodstvo, they have some 50% of income from EU, so 45% their own income and 55% of EU funding. That is something that we can think of, and in order to make it happen, we have to introduce all the respective European procedures. That's a principle, focusing resources, a partnership principle, that what Alexei demonstrated, some financial institution that would allow communities to receive access to those funding and for the reimbursement of it. So that's on our agenda today. As you might be aware, the respective national program to adopt the legislation to EU norms and standards, those things to be implemented both at the legislation and also the regional and community levels. Then I would like to demonstrate slides on strategic planning. 93% of regions been covered as of now, so they have strategies and endorse strategies, but in fact we started to analyze and do a new monitoring, and the figure is higher now, some 94.5 communities already within this process. But as Alexei mentioned, we prepare into a new circle of strategic planning 28 to 34. We draft a new strategy for national and regional strategies development and community developments, and those methodological recommendations are going to be endorsed by the ministerial order at the end of June. And since July, all the sectoral ministries, regions, communities, our key stakeholders are going to be engaged in preparing the new national strategy of regional development. The key thing that the strategy has to be transformed. It should not be a thesis paper. It should be structured well, 30 to 50 pages, set strict priorities, key priorities for all the functional domains of every territory, key parameters for macro regions, and clear data. It should be data-driven. It should be a roadmap for the further implementation. As been mentioned, the ministry jointly with government will do it, jointly with you as well, but also Anna had mentioned at the beginning about the sequence or the order that's been developed by the Ministry of Economy on sectoral strategies. Today we have a unique possibility. By the end of the year, 18 sectoral strategies have to be either to appear or to be updated, but any sectoral strategy, which is the foundation for public investment, should be screened by the Ministry of Territorial Development and Communities. So every sectoral strategy would be reviewed and analyzed in terms of impacting on regional policy, whether it contributes to disproportion or reduces the disproportion. So we step away from the process of the sectoral strategies live their own life and national policies they live their own life. It's a great opportunity to bring those things together. Any sectoral ministry that sets the policy has to consider the typology of the territory, has to consider whether it's a mountain, agricultural, or restoring territory. So these are the things at our agenda, and I'm sure that in 2026 we would be able to implement that together with you. I mentioned the planning model that we implement, and speaking about strategic planning, the strategy sets as a milestone, then the action plan for implementation, then the programs for regional development. Then when we refer to EU accession, we pay attention to priorities and structural funds costs allocated to the programs. They are not allocated to a strategy but to a given program. Every region has their own regional program, and then the document that more than 1,000 communities have that, the midterm plan of priority public investments. And then speaking about the space planning, that's the oblast regional level or community space development plan at the community level. So that's the scheme that partially been introduced into legislation, and the draft law already sits with Rada, has to support those ideas suggested by government. I also would like to mention the security approach and safety approach. We amended the National Strategy of Regional Development. We have clear definition of a frontline adjusted territories, 230 communities that adjust into our combat activity zones, and we have clear 6 priorities for those that have, in fact, to be considered by every ministry when they develop the funding attraction terms of reference or when they nominate competitions. All the programs available in the ministries on regional development mainly reflect those practice and procedures. Regional Reconstruction Development Fund or National Development Fund, 55% of funding was allocated to a front-adjusted communities and also occupied territories, four separate priorities. A separate element that we're going to consider today: those communities that don't have access to their territories also have to work, and they also have to have a vision and idea how to get back to those territories, how to support the refugees from these territories, and functional types of territories, the provisional modeling that the Board on Regional Development is on top of. The first thing that you could see, the restoration territories, the most affected communities, 127 communities, about 4 million individuals, correction. And here again you can see those are the territories which were occupied and the combat activities could return, and some 20% of infrastructure being destroyed because of Russia. Then the territories with a low economical development level, the index of capacity level less than 0.45. Then the mountain terrain, forestry territories, the steppe territories, techno crisis, national park territories, agricultural territories, regional growing territories, agglomerations, stable development territories. And when we speak about all these different types of territories, it is not only for the sake of definition, the logic of regional policy and EU community territories. Every territory should have the required support, a respective targeted program that would comprise the national efforts, financial, institutional, in order to support those territories or bring their level to an average national level, or if it is a stable development territory, to become a driver of economy development. And speaking about the public investments, a new circle of planning, those things, the territory-oriented approach and security-oriented approach should be reflected, whether it's a sectoral review, whether it's experts review, whether it's the preparation of public investment project takes place. A specific approach to specific territories who's be implemented, because mountain terrains, agricultural, forestry, they have different needs and requirements. Western territories and front-adjusted territories are different, so we have to bear that in mind, and we work on that with the Ministry of Finance, with Ministry of Economy. We talked that through, and I'm sure that should be reflected while updated the legislative base for upcoming reform. And completing the DREAM system been mentioned, we all work in DREAM, but the new product that's been implemented in since 2025, the single chair information system of regional development, what I've mentioned about analysis and monitoring, that is not happening. The qualitative monitoring of national regional policy is delayed during the wartime. So the plan is to restore that, and there is a tool to help to make it happen. It's about collecting qualitative data from the community level, from the regional level, integrating that within available IT region. So all that analytical data would be available locally. That's the preparation of qualitative template for the upcoming strategies. There should not be a thesis type paper, that would be a well-balanced and well-structured document. An IT product, Geo IT system, should help us. Next stage, that's integration with DREAM. Our logic is the following. It should be possible to see the level of implementation of every public project according to a parameter stated in the development strategy. So every investment project should be critical, should be targeted at. How do we measure that? That would be our joint task, to identify qualitative parameters, not an abstract objectives and goals, but to develop that direction critical to a community, critical to key stakeholders, that within 7 years we could meet the objectives that we planned. Thank you. Thank you for your brief. And finally, that's the part where we can ask questions or say something that you dislike or that you've been concerned with, and Dmitro said that he is keen to be a part of Q&A. Do you want to say anything before? Not that I want, I suggest, if there are no questions, I can tell something. Well, I'm happy to ask, and I'm sure we will have quite a number of questions here, and there. Good afternoon. My question to Dmytro. Thank you for your initiative and willingness to answer questions. Medvin community, Kiev Oblast, strategy, plans, and all there. We all aspire all good things. And as a deputy minister for economy mentioned, resources are limited. There is a reverse dotation, the example of our community where we're working for 3 years to attract additional taxpayers. Now we are going to a tax increase, and those taxes would not be sufficient to ensure a geospace planning. We need 100 million, but we have 10 million, and next year we're going to lose 1.5 million. So what is the logic behind? If on one hand there is not enough funding, why do you take away those funding away from communities? And how that logic could be terminated? We are working to attract funding to community to stimulate the development for several years, but then nation or a state takes away the resource that we attract. It's not only our community question. I'm sure it's 99%, if not 100% of communities which this reverse funding extraction takes place. While funding is not enough, while do you take away the funding from communities? I'm sure you're well aware. I will try to find the logic while it is not there. There is nothing new I'm going to tell. There is a system of horizontal balancing at the state. It's not only with Ukraine and the reverse extraction when you refer to. It's fair to say that people should be proud of you, and you should be proud of yourself, and I am proud of you, because the reverse is the indicators that you are developing. But the state and the country is huge, is large, and it is not the same. And this reverse system invented not by us. It says that all the levels of the state, financial, economical, services should be provided at the same level. We don't want to see these development spots and falling down spots. So people, we are the citizen, we are harmonizing. It's like your family analogy. You cannot be proud that there is a poor family member and you are a rich family member. It's a very rough analogy, but I'm trying to explain this logic. And you also know the figures of reverse extraction. It's not always, it's never 100% of extraction. When the formula is applied to minimize the human factor, reverse takes 50% of, let me call it, incorrect over income. So additional basic dotation, the same logic, never state at horizontal balancing provides 100%. It provides 80% tentatively, expecting that 20% would be generated as the result of the development. And one more time, I do understand, and you are aware about that, but speaking about overall figures, the reverse extraction, 30 billion, and basic dotation, 20 billion. So there is a state role to ensure this 10 billion difference. That's been supplied from the national budget, and again, been non-professional. That's the system that is quite honest, financially honest, and within the realities of nowadays. We have 15 more minutes, and let's try one by one, and then we collect few questions at one go. Dear Dmytro, Anatoly Melnichenko, Zhytomyr area. Following the colleague's comment, can you give a practical advice? What should we do in such a situation as, again, the reverse? We fully understand as a community, and we echo to your comments that there are communities that can provide reverse, and there are dotations from the state, and it's normal, and there is a practice. But the challenge from Olevska community, according to the ministry calculations, also the Ministry of Finance been adjusting and allocating the reverse dotation. For several years, we have the population identified as 8,300 individuals, although the number of population is growing because new housing's been introduced and people been registered. So we have some 12,000 people living in our community. Last year, the state approach, and if not mistaken, it has been mentioned by the Regional Development Ministry that the approach is going to be reviewed while calculating the number of population, referring to critical data based on the state registries, which the state has access to. And then it could be fair. And I also would like to draw attention to the ministry's representatives that originally the reverse dotation was calculated with 1 year delay. I might be wrong here. And the state approach was that we will bring that in accordance, a real number of population and real incomes based on the last year. So what the state has done, the state left the figure on incorrect number of population, but updated calculation of budget payments. So as an example of Olivska community, I'm sure we're not alone. Instead of making better, we received a worse case. So my sincere request, please advise, what should we do? How do we make it happen? So your ministry and all others who calculate the reverse figures would help us to make it fairly and honestly towards the community, towards inhabitants, and towards the state. Thank you. Well, I see. It's not rather a request, but a wish. One more time. When I try to reply, I expect that you are aware of what's going on. And while you describe the situation, you are quite knowledgeable on what's going on. We all understand the time at which we are living in, and a bit of resume here. We understand that the processes has taken place at the state, the war, we have shifts in the population, we're all aware about that. The Minister of Finance idea has not been changed. I'm trying to bring this case a bit more interestingly as it is. We received a letter from the State Statistics Service saying they cannot confirm the data about available population because the statistic is not recorded. Minister of Finance suggested the model, and why the Minister of Finance suggests that? Because you mentioned that, because that's part of the formula of horizontal balancing. We suggested to take actions at your level, inclusively, to fill the database of IDPs, of taxpayers database, and try, with your and God's support, to get the figures which we can include this horizontal balance in calculations, because Ministry of Finance is like Ministry of Truth. It's mathematics. We don't have like, dislike, we have pure figures. I see you all through the lens, through the figures, your expenses, your incomes, your figures, I just see. And this is the formula about justice. So coming back, so we received the formula from the State Migration Service, and we put that in legislation, because this is not a normal time. We need sort of a new transitional model. the imitation of honest. So we received the letter from Migration Service that we, the entity, are willing to own those registries, but unless communities would provide the data, and there is no clue how to make it happen, so if communities would not fill this data, we bear no responsibility for the data that we have and provide confirmed data at 5,600,000. We can confirm these others plus minus. We are not good with plus minus. And again, we put that norm in the budget. Dears, the thing that we're talking in order to ensure the financial justice, we have to review the situation altogether and take actions to fill those databases, to rely on them for calculations. What happens? You know that we were on this track with no accusations to anyone when the draft law on the budget comes for discussion platforms to MPs, rather city associations, any other associations, with the reflections that we cannot trust those migration figures. Let's take national statistics, and we are back to 2021, and that's it. And you see that. And when the budget is voted, I also see the document, so that's the way we live. And I'm going to conclude here. That's the constant chart, that's the constant talk on that. At every Congress, at every challenge that been highlighted. That's about Travers. It's all there. It's known to us. But to conclude, and you would dislike that. I don't like it. Ministry of Finance don't like it. Migration Service data on IDP are not accurate. National statistic data are not accurate. But I just would like to calm you down. You can check later on. We do in parallel the calculation models of the population at horizontal levels. You know, the difference in figures is not significant, really small. There are shifts that we can see, and I see it from your letters where you provide your figures and we try to put that in our calculations. I understand that's critical to you, but at the national level it's not a significant discrepancy, really small. There are many communities who lost following the application of the statistics formula. I know there is a humor without humor when you talk to community and says, this is a letter where you requested to apply the statistics data. That's your signature, correct. You lost 5 million of your incomes. No, I then want to refer to immigration statistics. No, not the way. If you would refer to the migration statistics, that would be more or less such a figure. So it's a fair question, but we are all in process. Thank you very much. Maybe from here and then to the other flank. Good afternoon, Mikhail Tenov, Tepolev community, Ternopil region. It's great to have the representatives of the key ministries here, but I do apologize, but I will continue the same subject, and I would disagree with you in terms of the justice. In order to identify justice, we have to review things properly. I'm not going to name communities in Khmelnytska region, which is a satellite of some analytical object where energy costs 500 hryvnia and elsewhere it costs 5,000 hryvnia. The roads were made, utilities, water, black water, schools are set, and obviously there is a reverse here, it's been extracted, and there is a logic about justice. But if there is a community like us, which is remoted from the big cities or populated areas under the urbanization process, we started with some scaring, losing figures in 2020, community been set.
And today, like each time we reach some kind of achievement, but then we are thrown back. We didn't have roads. We don't have roads. We can't afford decent education. Although we did everything to optimize. We optimized more than anyone in Ukraine over the short period of time. But again, we optimized. But then there's no educational subvention. We took stock. We maintained land issues. Then we have to service the roads that are state roads, and we only have 21 school buses that transport 700 children every day. And then we create eco-industrial park. So what's the question? So through the statistical data, we are now having 0.96, and now the industrial park that was registered in 2025. And now there's a third company entering it, and two of them are fully export-oriented, which is good for the country. But how do I engage people? It's about 1,500 jobs, and I need to create conditions, roads, education, healthcare, some simple things. Anyone who comes to that territory will need those services, but I will not have that because the reverse subsidy doesn't even begin. It's gonna come. I thought we will be talking about PIN, but money, sure. Well, I answered you about reverse. It's again about fairness is perceived differently. I'm going to talk about fairness, but you remember my words. It's not going to be clear to everyone. That's why I'm explaining for so long what's the modeling, what is the search for fairness. Because search for fairness is a more concrete term. What is the role of Minister of Finance? The revenues of the state budget, if you remember, 2.9 trillion. That's what we make as revenues. I'm not counting loans. Security and defense, 2.8 billion. So now we live on the remaining 100 billion. And when you see, when you understand on internal balances, 2.9 or 2.8, the difference is 100 billion. And this difference, 100 billion, it's what can the state spend on anything. Whereas anything then returns back. What is the PIN reform? I don't even like the word reform so much because we are shaping the culture of priorities. It's a synonym of planning. It's simply planning. It's a planning of resources. You say not enough, and I can say there's none. It's like a cold shower that should bring us back to what we want, what we can, and what we have. So your problems, I understand the problems. That's why I was telling you about 2.9, and the reverse from gas, it's assistance to each other. It's not recovered 100%. And you will never get this 100% subsidy because there's the stimuli, there's an incentive to continue to grow. That's why you don't have 100%. Okay, so we have 3 minutes. So all the questions together remaining and answer them in bank. So let's try to ask about strategic planning. Strategic planning. Velokolutskivska community, Transcarpathian region, and I was asking the question to Mr. Protsenko, but when I heard your explanation, it triggered. But don't take it personally. We're discussing here. You said you see our revenues. how much the state. Yeah, we see that. We hear that from the oblast, from the region. We see our revenues, what the budget gets, but we don't. Nobody wants to hear about our challenges. The heads of communities only know. Everybody sees how much we make, what investors came, but the challenges they don't want to hear, as my previous colleague said. Nobody sees that. Nobody wants to see that, or you won't see that in the monitors. Now, Mr. Procenko, you gave example of Polish partners, how much they win. Our community, we have a partner city from Poland. I talked to the Polish mayor about this. So all of that will be compared to what my previous colleague said. So we are a village community created in 2020. There is also city, urban communities. There are bigger communities that are regional and big city communities. They had the whole departments. For years they've been working on that. We in the village community, when we were created, none of us talked about the strategies or PIN or whatever. We didn't even think about it. There were no people who were trained to do it. Now we're doing it as we can. We have a financier, we have accountant, we have a deputy, village head, anyone, but not an actual specialist in strategy. So, in wartime, to introduce to your state roster, your staffing roster, I don't think it's reasonable. People don't like that. We can take example, a great example. Polish Republic, and they created for each voivodstvo, they created an agency that are coming to the voivodstvo. They organize the whole process. The community pays for those services, and then they go. So what do? We have accountant, financier, land manager. They don't know what to make ends meet with strategic planning. Who has to do that? And shouldn't the state create some helping agency? Maybe a commercial agency, but it's easier for us to pay for that as a service. So they're there, but they don't have enough time to work with all of us. So maybe we should scale them up somehow in the regions, because locally there are no specialists. Right, thank you. And one more question from this side. And then the answers. Okay, hello speakers and colleagues. Velikovyskivska community, I'm from Kirovograd region. As a colleague said, I said, yeah, let's create an agency. You know, you should apply integrated approach. We have a village community, not have enough population, but we have uranium mining shaft. In 3 years, the state had not signed an agreement for uranium, and the company's standing dormant. So they calculated like it produces, but they removed those funds. Like this year, about 9 million they've extracted. It's more than 10% from the budget. Whereas the salary for miners is still hanging from last year. So we have to pay for protected articles, but we cannot pay even for the internet. So take a look at the numbers and correct these things, because in this kind of a situation, community doesn't live. You extract funds, but you don't help out any. What kind of strategic planning can you talk about when you don't know what they will extract from you tomorrow? Because we only have land tax and revenue tax. So take a look at the numbers more thoroughly. Okay, thank you. We're running out of time, so let's make all the latest responses and comments. Each speaker. And some. Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question. It's really important. Let me split it in two parts. So first, the new approach to strategic planning. The new methodology was in June, communication, supported by our colleagues. Just recently we were in Transcarpathian, and you have support from ULEAD Europe to design new regional strategy, new regional policy. So next, the Agency of Regional Development. We have a certain experimental decree. We have 22 agencies. They are different capacity. Transcarpathian is not bad, and they have different competences. Some strong in strategic planning, some work with grants, some doing great reforms of public investment. And so today we already have a pilot experiment where we provided opportunity to agencies to help communities. In each macro region, we selected 2 cluster agencies of regional development who were strengthened from the state and who will be able to provide paid services for local self-governance. Of course, there will be paid services for smaller price than in the market. But again, the Odessa agency, they work great in strategic planning. I think you can exchange experience and you can work out a document, but the key thing is that we have to write a document. So we have to collect data to show how it works, but nobody will write that document for you, because otherwise it's just it's like a scientific thesis or even strategy which was not written by community. You have to understand the challenges and work on the strategic document. All right, thank you. Metro and then Anna. Well, too bad we have to end, because this is really interesting. You know, there are questions, I've been reading them, and now it's great that I can see people. So it's an interesting conversation. We've heard, but don't hold a grudge against Ministry of Finance. I try to explain the logic and process and thoughts and ideas and why so. There's no formalism. The formula of horizontal equalization, it's a 3-story building. And I see that there is a head of Sednevska community. So I live in Sednev half a life, so using this opportunity, if you need a personal consultant on how to do reforms, I even have a house still. I'm traveling over there often. So it's just using this opportunity. It's maybe a little bit of a joke, but still. Give my regards to the village. My grandmother said that if a person wants to see paradise, they have to come to Sednev. That's her phrase. That's true. All right, thank you. You can stay with us for coffee and tea. Yeah, I will comment what you said on the necessity of training. We'll understand that you don't need to hire new people because there's no capacity for that. But what has to be done is train your people, new rules. And as I said at the beginning, agencies of regional development. And based on those agencies, there will be expertise centers. There will be people who, for free, will be able to train the community. So we're now attracting donor funding. And so based on every agency, there will be specialists present, not teachers, but actual practitioners who will be present in the regions. And we hope that somewhere by the end of this year, there will be more or less start options, and it will be a great support on the regional level. And this will be equalizing these agencies out because they have different capacities, as Vitaly said. So by the end of this year, for sure, some tools, new capacity building opportunities will be presented to communities. Thank you very much for the speakers. There will be a couple of minutes coffee break to ask. And next sessions will also have people from Ministry of Finance, and you'll be able to talk to them. Thanks a lot.